Welcome to episode 227 of the Shared Security Show. And joining me this week are my cohorts in crime, co-hosts Scott Wright and Kevin Johnson. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
And we're also joined by very special guest Tanya Janca, who is founder of the We Hack Purple Academy and now director of developer relations and community at Bright.
Yay.
Welcome back to the show,
Yay,
Tanya.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you on the show again. You've been on a few times, actually, going all the way back to 2018. That seems like a lifetime ago.
Can we not refer to that as all the way back? I'm feeling old enough as it is today.
Well, the pandemic kind of made time just different, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Extended time. I don't know how to put it, but it seems a while ago. So you've been up to a few things since we last talked, which has been about a year now, a little over a year. So what's been going on?
So last time we talked, I had founded a startup company called We Hack Purple, and we had basically a big online community that we used to charge money to join. It was $7 a month. It wasn't expensive, but we charged money. And then we had online courses that were on demand whenever you wanted them. And basically we got more and more customers, and that was awesome.
Yes.
And then one day we decided we wanted to make the community free. So basically I was like, we're making enough money from online courses. And I started doing corporate training, and corporate training is extraordinarily lucrative. I don't know how else to word it, but you make tons and tons of money, which is, just to be clear, that's awesome. You have to work really hard, but you get to do it. And then I was like, we're not making that much money each month from the We Hack Purple community. And so I took a poll and I asked everyone in the community, and I'm like, listen, I don't know if this sounds weird, but we only make like a few $1,000s a month. We're now doing really well from the academy. So I don't mean to sound weird, but we don't need that little tiny extra bit of money. And instead, like, we could make the community free, but that means it's going to grow and it's going to become a lot bigger. It's not going to be a couple hundred. It's going to be a couple thousand. Is that okay with you? And unanimously, all the community members that did voted yes. So I was like, let's do
Nice.
it.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then We Hack Purple had quite a few companies contact us about acquiring us. And some of them were like, we want to buy your stuff and then charge way, way, way more for it. And I was like, oh no, that's not appealing. I wanted to do the opposite of that. I want to change our industry for the better. I want to make new AppSec engineers. So like, we had this little program where we would make introductions and get job interviews for our grads. We had a diversity scholarship where we would put people who are from underrepresented groups free through our entire program and then introduce them for jobs. And I was like, no, like, I want to have more people know stuff, not fewer people know stuff. I want to, I guess, break down the gates of all the gatekeeping. And I was like, so that's the opposite of what we want. And so then eventually, so we kind of up and down, having lots of discussions with companies. And then Bright Security, I've been their advisor for a year and a half. And so we had a meeting. They're like, yeah, we just did Series A and it like exploded. It went really well. And I'm like, awesome. And they're like, so you know how like whenever we meet, we're like, hey, if you wanted to work here, that would be cool. And then you're like, no, I run my own startup. Because what I would do when startup company, so like other startups would meet with me and be like, you should come do DevRel for us. I'm like, oh, because my company's not a real company? It doesn't count? And they're like, of course it is. I'm like, why don't you work at my startup? I'll offer you a job. And they're like, no. I'm like, well, you're asking me to give up on my dream. That's what you're doing.
Oh.
And they're like, oh. Yeah. So Bright was like, yeah, no, we love your dream. So what if we buy your company? And then, you know how you want to have way more people? What if we make all of your training free? And I was like, what? Is this real? Yeah. And they're like, we still want you to do DevRel, but we want you to teach and basically have all of your lessons free. We want you to continue to make tons of content. It does not just need to be about Bright. We want you to make the community bigger and better. And like, then you could have a budget. And so then we can give away, like, we have like little contests and gifts and stuff.
Maybe you have squishy dolls too that you can give away like Kevin does.
We don't have any squishy dolls yet, but
No,
because we're
no,
called
no.
Bright, we made flashlights.
Oh, okay.
Because we're
Because
bright.
you're bright.
I enjoy the punniness of it.
Good.
I love it.
Yeah, so basically I was like, well, this is awesome. So eventually, like, when the lawyers finished battling, because that is a dumb thing that happened, like, their lawyers are lawyers, they like wrestle or whatever they do. But we agreed on everything, and then eventually they did. And so then, now it's been I guess like a month and a half now, or a month since the acquisition, and it's going really well. And I got to bring pretty much all of my staff over. So I had like some students, and like some of them went back to school, and then some of them came with us because not everyone wants to go, but pretty much everyone went, which was awesome. And it's really great.
Nice. Congratulations.
It's really
That's
good.
awesome.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you. It's so awesome. And so now, so basically what we did is, so people that are in the academy, they get to keep taking the courses that they're doing and keep their progress and saved results and test scores, etc., in the academy. But we copied all of the stuff into the community. And so if you join the community, you can take all the courses for free. And so that's community.wehackpurple.com. And there's no like advertisements for Bright inside the courses or anything. It's just like secure coding or application security or Azure security or whatever it is that we're teaching. And I am so excited. And as you could imagine, the community has grown quite a bit since we announced that there are courses in there.
That's awesome.
That is
so cool.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, I know we talked about this on the show before about affordable training, and Kevin, I know, is very passionate about having affordable options for training, because it's so difficult these days, just with the content that's out there and the different organizations that are providing it. But I know your training has been, I've heard people talk about it, and I know it's, known in the community as good quality training, AppSec training. Mm-hmm. So I think it's great that it's offered now for free through your acquisition. So very exciting stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, we should all thank Bright, because basically they made that possible, because I still have bills, right? And so
of course,
because people are like, well, if you want to be free, it should just be free. And I'm like, yeah, but my mortgage is still due on whatever day of the month, right? And
yep.
So sometimes, I feel like I got the best of both worlds, if that makes sense. And also now that I don't have to run an entire company and be in charge of the livelihood of several people, I have more time to have a life. I don't know if any
what's a life? I don't know what a life is.
Important.
What is this thing?
Yeah, so I'm going to start writing my next book when I get back from RSA. So Alice and Bob are going to learn secure coding next. But I wouldn't have been able to start it if I was still running all of We Hack Purple all by myself. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is pretty exciting.
Yep. That's awesome. And speaking of that, the last time you were on the show, you did talk about Alice and Bob Learn Application Security, which is a great book, by the way, for our audience. We'll have a link in the show notes to order that. Highly recommended if you want to learn the basics about AppSec. Even if you've been in AppSec for a while, there's still things that you can learn. And I tell people it's a great reference book just to have on the shelf, right? As you're talking to people and developers especially. But I'm curious, since you've written the book and since we last talked, has there been anything that comes to mind that's changed with AppSec maybe since then?
Okay, so I have learned some more stuff since then that I want to add. So when I wrote the book, I hired my biggest internet troll to be my editor, because he would pick apart my technical articles, and he was never rude, but he'd be like, Tanya, you forgot this one nuance. Or in these specific situations, sometimes this can happen and you are not 100% preparing. And I'd be like, oh, thanks, Dominique. So then when I was like trying to pick an editor, I'm like, I don't know if this is weird, but would you want to be? And he's like, I would love that. And he's just so strict and so thorough. It was like beautiful. It was really hard. Technical edits are hard. It's way worse than grammatical. So apparently I'm very promiscuous with my capital letters, and apparently I use way too many commas, which didn't offend me. But when someone's like, well, actually, you know, this advice is like pretty lenient, Tanya, blah, 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 blah. Right. So I found that really, really helpful. So there have been no technical errors in the book that anyone has ever reported to me. There's only been grammatical errors, and I'm like, who cares? I mean, I do care, but I don't really care. Like instead of an, or is instead of it, stuff like that. But there's only a handful, but the technical stuff is on target. So for things that have changed, so first of all, there's way more security headers now. There's a bunch of new security headers that didn't exist then. So I would want to add those. But I also have really, really, really gotten into security champions since then. And I don't mention it in the book. And I have to say that it's like a really good way to scale your team. So in my course, I go in different ways that you can scale your AppSec. But like when I started my first security champions or my first application security program, I completely stumbled into creating a security champions program. And I didn't even know what it was called until maybe 2018 when I met my friend Ray. So there's this blog called hellasecure.com. So hella-secure.
I love it.
I know, right? And it's two dudes that have been doing AppSec forever, and they just write kind of from the bottom of their heart, if that makes sense. And so he had this article about security champions. I'm like, oh, that's what I do every time I make a program. Each dev team has like my guy or my gal, this person that I always talk to, and I always give the news to them, and I train them and I show them because they're the ones that are super excited. And so he's like, yeah, like my program's 5 years old. And he ended up at the 6th year leaving his company because he's like, you literally do not need me anymore. Your champions run my whole AppSec program. I can go now. I can put myself out of a job. But really, they were like, please don't go. But like the idea of, because you're not going to be able to hire 27 AppSec people. Like you're not going to be able to because of budget and because like you just won't be allowed generally. And so previously it'll be me and then 100 devs, or me and 1,000 devs, or 500 devs, or 600. And you have to scale that, right? You can't know them all by name. And so finding that person that is super passionate on each dev team that will give you the time of day, that wants to learn. It's like, yeah, show me how to hack that stuff with that cool scanner thing you've got. Like, yes. And so meeting those people, encouraging those people, and enabling those people to kind of help shepherd their own team and lead their own team in security, because I can't do that for 15 teams and to do a good job. And so, yeah, I would really like to add something about that. I feel like that's a really important thing that I missed in the book, of like how you could make it bigger and better.
Very cool.
Totally. Yeah, and that kind of leads to, like you said, you're now writing a book on secure coding, which I think is definitely an area that I see lacking, especially in this this world of let's just automate everything, right? And I don't do code review, right? The SaaS scanner is going to take care of that for me, right? How many times have you heard that?
I have heard stuff like that a lot. Yeah, the day we can automate all of AppSec will be great. I will be happy to be put out of a job when all the apps are perfect and no one needs me anymore. I could just go back to coding. It'll be awesome. Yeah. But until then, we still need some manual efforts. And like, who fixes those bugs? Right. It's mostly manual. I had some clients meet with me the other day, and they're like, is there a tool that will find the bugs but then fix all of them for us? Because we want to buy that. We'll pre-order it. I'll work on it. I'll let you know.
Yeah. We're a couple months off from that. Yeah.
Just like a few weeks, minutes even. But yeah, I feel like I feel like secure coding is a thing where like sometimes. So the first AppSec policy that I read, one of the items was developers shall not write insecure code. And I was like, this is crap. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, so what is insecure code? How, like, if there's a vulnerability in it? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, do you think if they knew there was a vulnerability in it that they would write it that way? Well, no. And I'm like, so then do you think that they know actively that they're disobeying this rule? I'm like, because every developer, including me, especially me, when I was a dev, I did all the bad things that other devs did. I went to college in the 90s. So I did not know all the thousands of things that devs are expected to know now. I'm like, do you think that I on purpose was like, I'm going to mess my employer over and write insecure code on purpose? No, that's not what they're thinking. I'm like, they're doing the best they can with the amount of knowledge they have and the amount of support that they have. I'm like, this is stupid. We need to take this out. It's insulting. They're not, because then you're going to be like, well, you broke policy because you wrote insecure code. I'm like, no, this is, no. That same policy also said that cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery were the same thing. So it was not written from an enlightened, like that. The people that wrote it did the best that they could, but they were not AppSec experts. These are people that were experts at some other things that got basically like, it's like, you're late to the meeting, Dan. Guess what you have to do? Oh, man.
So they obviously didn't have a policy that said, thou shalt not write bogus requirements.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like what secure code is a bit nebulous. And so I'm hoping to have kind of like general agnostic advice and then general best practices for like checking your stuff. And then I'm hoping to get into different languages and frameworks with like, watch out for this and make sure you use these cool things. So like, for instance, for .NET, there's some things that you should probably worry about, but then there's also super cool tools, a lot of which are free, or like, there's different functions that help with security that are really awesome. And it's like, you should use this, don't write your own. You should use that, don't write your own. And so kind of like best practice plus watch out for this stuff. This is what I'm planning, but I'm not done mapping it all out yet.
That's awesome. Well, we're definitely looking forward to that. And we'll probably get you back on the show once you release your next book for sure.
Thank you.
And that kind of leads me to another question. We still hear the term DevSecOps, right, being thrown around. Probably more than, it's died down a little bit, just a little bit, but there was, I think, the last couple of years, definitely a lot of hype around organizations saying, "Yep, we're moving to DevSecOps." And I know last time we talked a little bit about how a lot of organizations they're still in Agile or even, God forbid, waterfall, right? Or we'll call it water agile fall, right?
I think it's pronounced water fail.
Water fail? Is that it? Okay. Yep. Water fail. What are you kind of seeing with customers and clients these days? Like, have they made that switch, or are they still on the journey to the elusive DevSecOps?
Okay, so I see a lot of companies where they saw someone awesome, like from Netflix, let's say, speak at a conference, and then they're like, "Why aren't we doing that? We're failures." I'm like, no, that's like you looking at the front of a fitness magazine and be like, "Why doesn't my body look like that?" It's like, because you don't work out 18 hours a day. That's why. So calm down. Put the abusive magazine image away. Like to be clear, I think Netflix is doing totally awesome things. But do I think that that's realistic for every company? Absolutely not. And so for DevSecOps, so first of all, I'm going to give like a short definition because I teach all day. So like I'm addicted to this, but basically great. So DevOps is a new modern way to build software. And it's like about culture and processes. And they value efficiency and working together and testing over and over and over and over again and automating that testing so you don't do boring stuff. And that's why it's a lot better than the previous ones, because you got feedback all the time so you could always improve. And you didn't have to waste time doing boring stuff. And so DevSecOps, in my opinion, is what the security folks do when they work with DevOps people. So if they are all going to do their work in sprints, we need to learn to sprint. If they are going to use a pipeline, I need to figure out how to do my super duper important tests in the pipeline, and then do maybe my slower tests or the tests where I know it's going to throw false positives and I know I'm going to manually need to look through it. So I need to do that outside the pipeline, so that everyone on the DevOps team still totally tolerates my presence. I'm actually, so I just wrote a new conference talk that I'm giving like all over the place, and it's called How to Put DAST, like Dynamic Security Scanning, into a CI/CD without losing any friends. Because I have had so many consulting calls where they're like, we bought this from insert name of vendor here, and they told us just put it in the pipeline and that it would find all these vulnerabilities, and it's been 6 hours and it's still running, and I have devs knocking on my door and I have the door locked and I'm hiding under my desk because they're yelling now. And they have pitchforks, I think. And it's like, you put this tool in all of these things and it's falling apart. And it's like, okay, so yes, you can totally put a DAST in a pipeline. That's cool. But here's strategy. So don't put it on full blast. Like, how, firefighters, they use a fire hose and, you point it at something and then it's obliterated because it's more water than we could ever imagine because we get water from a tap usually. And so I'm like, you don't want to turn on full blast. You want to like chill out. You want to just do some tests or just look at some technology or just look at the new feature and only test that part. And then you still want to run, that full thing, do it overnight. And do it like in a dev or a pre-prod environment, or if your DAST is safe in prod. But I'm like, but don't put it on full blast. And so I feel like a lot of vendors are giving messages where I'm like, ooh, that's in reality, that will really break your relationship. And I tell people this a lot, that being AppSec is like being a social butterfly of tech. So when I was a pen tester, I tell people, I'm like, I got really lonely, but I'm a super extrovert. And like when I was a dev, I could chat with all my dev friends. But when you're a pen tester, I was like in a data center by myself. And I was like, where are all my dev friends? Where are all my security friends? And so with AppSec, I get to hang out with devs and security folks all the time and talk to people. And if you have bad relationships, or if you have like really awful social skills, like you're really rude or you're really arrogant, you're not going to get stuff done. Like you're just like, so first of all, like devs are smart. Otherwise they would be ex-devs, right? Like you can't be a dummy and be a software developer. They're not, it's not going to work. And so if you talk to them like they're stupid, I don't know, like I assume we're all the same on this call. If someone like talks down to you and talks to you like you're an idiot and won't explain and tries to boss you around, it's like, who do you think you are, my parent? No. And to be clear, my parents do not speak to me that way, but it's just not going to work. And so if they trust you and let you put stuff into their pipeline, like this is their production run, this is really important to them, this is their baby, right? Like they have like these 72 little tests that they did and they've worked so hard to make them fast. And then you're like, here's my SAST with 98% false positives. And it like breaks the pipeline every time for no reason. They're like, we're breaking up, Tanya. You're not allowed in our pipeline anymore. Access denied. Right. And so I feel like maybe it's vendors trying to promise like the world instead of giving them like more actionable advice. And I mean, like I get lots of consulting hours, so that's cool. But I think it'd be better if instead they gave them like more direct advice. Like, yeah, do a full scan once a month overnight, and then you look through the results. But then in your pipeline, just test the new feature or only do this subset of tests until you never find that anymore, then change and do different types of vulnerability tests. And you can run that in 15 minutes and it'll be true positives because blah, and like give them strategies for success. So yeah, this is what I do. Like when I go work somewhere, I'm like, I'm not going to just turn on full blast and be like, no one needs to like me here. But it's true, right? Like, have you ever gone in somewhere and you see all the tools disabled? Like I've gone in and they're like, oh yeah, we're running a SAS scan on every single pipeline and blah, blah, blah. I go and I check, it's like disabled, 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 disabled. And then the place where it's not disabled, it's like alerting mode only and no one is checking those alerts. I'm like, oh yeah, working real well. I don't want to hear that it's good. I want to see that it's running and that like we're finding stuff and I'm helping So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this meme where there's this guy and he's so excited and he's like, I finally checked all the boxes. This means we're secure. And it's like that. No one wants to check boxes. We want to protect our orgs. So yeah, sorry, a bit of a rant.
No. I mean, I think, especially Kevin and I, we've been, pen testers, we like to be the checkbox uncheckers. So that's the fun part,
Yeah.
That's why we do it.
Oh yeah.
That's
totally
right.
the reason.
So imagine this scenario. You're out of the office unexpectedly and a colleague pings you because they need access to some system you have credentials for. Now, our listeners would never send passwords over email or Slack, right? But what about your coworkers? How many organizations out there are sending logins back and forth in plain text? Worse yet, how many just store all of their logins on a shared spreadsheet? We all know that human errors are the biggest threat to your organization's security. But did you know that weak or stolen passwords account for over 80% of all data breaches? Now, there are tools out there that can allow you to share credentials, set access permissions, and monitor the dark web for stolen logins. And Keeper Security's enterprise password management platform does just that. Keeper locks down logins, payment cards, confidential documents, API keys, and database passwords in a patented zero-knowledge encrypted vault. And it takes less than an hour to deploy across your organization. Sign up for a Keeper free trial for your organization today and get a free 3-year personal plan. Stop sharing emails and spreadsheets with the keys to the kingdom. Get started by visiting keepersecurity.com/shared security.
You want your organization to be secure and compliant and to have a healthy culture, but your employees' lack of awareness makes you vulnerable to data theft, fraud, and compliance penalties. It's frustrating that the boring, static training content that's being used today has failed to improve employees' ability to defend against cyber attacks. At ClickArmor, we know that without using gamification, it's extremely hard to get staff to understand how to avoid threats. Our gamified simulations and challenges have provided a 50% average improvement in thousands of employees' ability to spot phishing threats. Go to clickarmor.ca/shared security to get your free gamified phishing assessment for up to 500 employees. You'll see quickly how gamified simulations can help your team be more resilient and compliant and help avoid costly ransomware and fraud incidents. Let ClickArmor help you go from being an underappreciated, stressed out fall guy to being an innovative leader who's the catalyst for greater productivity in your organization.
What do you think the next big thing is in AppSec? I know that's a very broad question, but what do you see as kind of the next thing that's coming?
Okay, in my dreams or for real? So
maybe for real.
Let's do both. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so in my dreams, we're going to have a ton of new people enter our field. In my dreams, I attract a ton of software developers, and all of us do, to become AppSec professionals so that they have that dev experience and that dev mindset. In my dreams, software developers start taking ownership of the tools. And so in reality, what I am seeing is some new people coming to our field, but I see a lot of devs who care way more about security than ever before. I see devs where they're like, well, are you going to run the scan or not? Because I want to scan. And before they're like, maybe we could sneak by her. And now they're like, Tanya, I need your attention. Can you review this design with me? I'm like, oh, yes, I can. Thank you for showing it to me instead of waiting until the very last minute. So I am seeing devs being more interested, and I'm seeing them literally take ownership and sometimes leave the security teams behind. So I still do private trainings, and I did one this morning, but basically companies will hire me, and I'd say 2/3 of the time it's the security team that hires me, but 1/3 of the time the software developers have all, so I don't know if any of you were devs before, but my training budget was $2,200 a year, and that's not enough to go to insert name of my competitors. And so but just to be clear, their training's excellent. I'm not saying that's not, but just that devs don't have the money for that. And so what they'll do is a bunch of devs will all put their money together and hire me to come in and train all the devs without the security team's knowledge. I even had them say, please don't tell our security team you're here. We've asked for help and they won't let us. And we're not allowed any security tools. Only they're allowed security tools. So could you help us find free open source stuff? Because we don't have anything. And we don't have a secure coding policy or guideline or standard. And we don't have this. Can you help us? And then I'm helping them build their own AppSec program because the security team is like, we do compliance and you'll fill out this 80-page document about this that gives very little value to you. And you will do as we say. And they're like, yeah, but could someone look at my code or something?
And you will not write insecure code.
Yes.
Yes, you shall be
yes,
funny.
Exactly. And they're just like these little puppies who seems like my owner's hitting me. I'm like, it's okay, sweetie, I'll take you away. Like, I don't know how to explain, but like they really, really care and they really want to make secure software, and they're being almost disabled by their security team, like with older mindsets where they're like, no, you can't use a pipeline because, you know, you have to go through this gate process where we can't get back to you to weeks at a time, and you have to fill out 1,000 documents for us, and then they don't even read the documents. Do you know what I mean? And the devs are like, could you just teach us how to do awesome input validation? I'm like, oh yeah. And like, and so a lot of times I'm like looking for stuff where they're like, can you help us find like free SaaS things to do scans so that they don't know we're doing them, because if they catch us, we're in trouble. And I'm like, oh yeah, we can do this. And it's weird to feel like you're secret tiptoeing around the security team because and it's not, I'm sure the security team doesn't think they're being that way. But I mean, if the developers feel the need to hire me on the side and trying to do it in a way so the security team doesn't find out, like there's a reason for that. And I believe it's kind of an old school way of thinking. But there's lots of great security teams, just to be clear, tons and tons and tons. It's rare that happens. And sometimes the security teams come to the training, which is the best, because I'm like, warrants, tell them about this. And then they'll be like, yeah, we just got this thing and it does this. And I'm like, yes. Because when we're singing from the same song sheet, that is the best, right? Where I can reinforce the things that are really important to that security team. Because for instance, so like, let's say you're like training and working with a bank, they have different things that are really important to them versus if you're training a government department or if you're training, you know, a small startup. Anyway, it's bad when you conflict with your advice.
Oh yes, very much, very much. So what's next for you? And like I mean, I know the book and you've got all that you're working on, but you know, what are some things that you're going to be working on at Bright?
Okay, so I am doing developer relations and community at Bright. So first of all, we're going to do a lot more events with We Hack Purple. So that means events that are free for anyone to come to, but you have to quote unquote become a member, which means give us your email. And we don't send marketing emails, we send stuff about the community. But basically, we do a lot of things where we ask the community what they want, and then we do that thing. So we're like, I don't know if this is weird, but would you like product demonstrations? Because there's some products for AppSec where basically if you engage, then you have a salesperson on your back for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah.
I've even heard of people getting like texts and calls at home at all hours from salespeople, which I personally find offensive. But you do want to know what it does and see it work. So I was like, would we want product demos? Like, is that weird? Like, I don't mean a sales pitch. I mean, like, this is the problem we're solving. Here's how we solve it. Let me show you like some ninja moves. And they're like, yes. So we've been doing that. And then we've been having a lot of community members give talks. And sometimes it's their first time ever presenting. And we have, I believe, really kind people in our community. So that's really cool. So basically I'm doing a lot more community stuff, which is awesome because I love that. And then also creating a lot more educational content. So for instance,
nice.
You know, if the Bright scanner finds something, it's like, we found this, you know, you should fix it like this. I'm like, well, I want to create a video and a lesson plan and code samples and like basically hold their hand the whole way through. And they're like, oh, that sounds pretty good. But share it with everyone. Do you know what I mean? So like, yes, you can put that in the product and that's awesome. But I'm like, why not tell the whole world how to fix reflected cross-site scripting versus DOM-based cross-site scripting or whatever the thing is. And like, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that all these different types of scanners find, and people see it and they're like, could you explain that in English, please? So we're thinking just basically, I feel like these are lessons that anyone could want to learn if they're trying to write more secure code. So it's like, why is this super scary? How can I make sure I don't write that code like that? Or how can I go look for it myself? Like I remember one of my first technical talks I did was cross-site scripting deep dive. And I remember thinking like, oh, once I started to know what to look for, I can't not see it. Like I look at code, I'm like, oh, like it's right there. But when I first started, like when I was first doing AppSec, I was like, oh, there's cross-site scripting. And it's like, you know, you didn't do this proper input validation or you didn't use any encoding. And I'm like, where's the encoding go? I'm like, oh, it goes here. I'm like, cool. And then like later, I'm like, oh, that one doesn't have encoding. Oh, look at those. And then I look at other people's code. I'm like, bing, bing, bing. So if I can show other people to do that, then the whole world becomes more secure, if that makes sense. And so I'm hoping basically to make a lot more content and smaller, more bite-sized things. So when you build a course, if people pay money to take it, they finish it. But we give a bunch of courses for free that were really long, that we worked really hard on, and people won't, like, they finish it significantly less often. And it sounds weird, but it's because they paid. And I saw a Twitter tweet last night from this lady I follow, and it said, if someone gave you $100, or no, if someone gave you $1 million, would you be able to finally finish that Udemy course? It's like, because like people just never finish them because they're free or because they're cheap, because they don't have this huge financial investment. And so I plan to quote unquote trick people into learning more by having shorter lessons and shorter
and charging them for them.
Like if it's just no, we're gonna make them free.
No.
No, but I feel like, so like the first time where I built a course, so I did like a minimal viable product, which is what you're supposed to do when you do a startup. And so I had this 45-minute lesson about the OWASP top 10, and I just covered all of them. And when I have this friend named Vane, and she does AppSec, and I really respect this person a lot. And she's like, Tanya, I am an expert in AppSec, and I had trouble following by minute 40. I need you to break this up into little pieces so you don't hurt me. It's too much. And she's like, stop. Oh, we're impressed. Okay, calm down. And so then we broke everything up so that all the lessons were like way shorter, but the course was still really long. And people that paid, basically they completed it, and people that didn't, most of them didn't complete it. So we made these shorter mini courses, and people did the crap out of those. So I'm like, we should make smaller bite-sized pieces that people, and I want to eventually make it like a subscription. Like, so the We Hack Purple newsletter, there's a blog article in it every single week. And so every week you get like this little tiny lesson. So eventually I'd like it to be not only a lesson, but also a video so you could read and listen. So one of our core values is accessibility, inclusion, and diversity. So by one, I meant 3. But basically, it's really important to me that all different types of learners can learn. So I'm dyslexic. So in Canada, I'm considered learning disabled, but I like to think that I just learn in a different way. And so when I was making all the stuff, I'm like, we have to have closed captioning. We have to have things that, aren't visually awful. So for instance, like we can't have like white text on black background. If people have trouble seeing, that's really difficult for them. Like, it's really important that we describe what we're doing so people that can't see at all can still go along. We need things for people, English is their second language. And like we did all of these things. And so the We Hack Purple community actually has like a significant number of people who are disabled that are part of it because they feel like they matter to us, because they do. And so, yeah, so that's the thing I want to keep making sure is important. And so this week, June 1st, we release a screen reader version of our scanner.
Oh, awesome.
I'm really excited about this because like I want people who are blind to still be able to smash and hack things. So cool. I'm like super excited that like I'm bringing our values with us. So yeah. Anyway, small battles.
That's awesome. That is
Thank
awesome.
You.
So how can our audience connect with you? Obviously Twitter. We all know you on Twitter, of course, and LinkedIn. But any other way, obviously, to sign up for the newsletter, I think, what's the best way for people to do that?
Okay, so I have a newsletter, which is newsletter.shehackspurple.ca. And so like, it's kind of like my personal site, shehackspurple.ca. But then We Hack Purple has a newsletter that's more formal, but it still has silly memes because we can't help ourselves. But that's newsletter.wehackpurple.com. And then Bright has a newsletter, and you have to go to brightsec.com and then click on the newsletter button, or just attend any webinar and they'll just sign you up. But basically, if you want to find me, I feel like Twitter is a good place. So I'm at SheHacksPurple, or more often the community. So I kind of like, it's my jam. Like basically I want to make my favorite place on the internet. So I made the We Hack Purple community, and we have, basically you have to say why you're joining. And as long as why you're joining isn't so I can harass others, or some other bad thing. Like, well, one guy was like, so I can sell my product to people. And I was like, advertising is not allowed. However, if you want, you could give a presentation about it. And some people might come and some people might not, but you're not allowed to like put advertisements. That's not allowed. Okay, buddy. And he's like, cool. So we still let him in and he obeyed the code of conduct. So everything's okay, right? But basically, unless you're not like, so I can be a jerk, then we let you in. And yeah, I'm there and I take messages there and we have like chats and sometimes we hang out. We haven't hung out in a while because the acquisition took a lot of time. I have never spent so much quality time with my lawyer before. And I was like, you know, it'd be cool if I could spend more time doing my job.
Yeah.
So it took a lot of time, but I think I'm almost caught up on all my messages in there. But sometimes, like, for instance, we got together a few months ago and we just suggested different sci-fi books to each other because I really like sci-fi. And I had done like this Twitter thread and someone's like, oh my gosh, I have like this big long thread of books I've read. And I was like, let's trade. And so basically a lot of us all read each other's book lists and then we talk about it. And that's just a small part of the community. Yeah. But basically you can, and we let community members organize events too. So we have, I think, 12 people on our organizing committee now, volunteers. And so then they run events. Like we're doing an event on AppSec burnout, and it's a Chatham House rules event. So there's no recording. And you're not supposed to say what happens there later. But basically, a lot of people that do AppSec get really, really frustrated with devs that won't fix things or management that doesn't take them seriously. And it's like, how do you get over that? What do you do? Like, do you have tips and tricks? And just like, sometimes you just want to vent to other people that totally understand what you're going through. And so, yeah, a lot of our things are recorded, but not that one. And basically, we just let the community kind of set a lot of what we do. Because if someone asks for it, we ask other people, do you want to help organize this? And if people say yes, it's like, well, clearly we got to do it. As long as it's not really expensive, I'm like, let's go. And I think we're starting to build in-person chapters. So I went to New York and we had a meetup in person and they want to build a chapter now. And someone in Switzerland wants to build a chapter. And so I think now that I'm going to have more time, that we're going to start having more in-person things, maybe with some social distancing because of COVID, but basically like each country kind of sets their own standard on those things. But yeah, it's kind of awesome, right?
It is.
Nice.
It
nice.
is. And we'll have all those linked in the show notes for our audience. So you can check that out. But Tanya, it has been a pleasure as always having you on the show. Really happy about your new venture and your continued success. So it's great to see.
Exciting to watch. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your support, because when people have me on their podcast and then I can say stuff like, come take free courses. Like if no one took them, it wouldn't be worth making them free. Right. Do you know what I mean? Like that's what I want. I want new AppSec engineers.
Yes.
So thank you very much to all three of you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are absolutely welcome. And we'll have you on again when the book's ready. So
yes. Okay, I better hurry then.
Yeah.
Takes
2 weeks.
Oh my God.
All right. Thanks, Tanya.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, hit that like and subscribe button. To catch all the latest from the show, visit our website, sharedsecurity.net. Follow us on Twitter at SharedSec, and join our Reddit community on the Shared Security Show subreddit.